A girl named Alice and her mother Johanna are going somewhere in their car. Alice asks about her father, to which her mother responds that he will be back very soon. Johanna is hiding a NASA device CAL core. They'd arrive at their small home covered by snow in North Sweden. Alice wishes to hear a story of the space from her mom on her iPad. Alice takes out her iPad and plays a story of a woman named Johanna, her mother. Johanna takes the NASA's device and hides it somewhere outside the house. Afterwards, she returns home and sees her sleeping daughter, who suddenly starts screaming. As Johanna goes out of her house, she sees a light in front of her and starts moving towards it. 5 weeks ago in Street, Germany, we saw Johanna's family, her husband Magnus and her daughter Alice. Alice video calls her mom, who's inside the space station with people from 3 to 4 countries. There, a boy named Paul is working on a device called CAL core. A total of 5 people are present in this space station, which is 286 miles above the Earth. California Space Agency contacted Paul while he was working. They ask him about the CAL core, to which he responds that he's working on it. Afterwards, he activates this device, leading to a big blast. People start colliding with each other as if there is a big hole in their space station. Furthermore, their contact with the Earth breaks. After a long time, the people are safe and extinguish the fire in a part of the space station. Paul gets a deep wound on his hand, resulting in severe blood loss. He is treated by the people, who then contact another country on the Earth, telling about Paul's hand. Afterwards, they have to cut his hand due to severe blood flow. An astronaut named Elia informs about the severity of the damage done to the space station, almost 55% of which was damaged. A part of the space station started working on the solar panels after the light went off. Alice and Magnus reached the Space Center of Germany. Henry is the chief of this matter in California. The web becomes very surprised to see the signals from that device called CAL core. The web contacts Johanna to tell her that she will be in the dark for the next 20 minutes. That is, the sunlight on the other side will take 20 minutes to come over you. Johanna does all the navigation and says that the Soyuz 1 is where people can sit and go on the ground. That is almost the same, but Soyuz 2 has suffered a lot of damage. A lot of wires have been broken and a lot of oxygen has also come out. Then, Henry calls a man in Germany, instructing him to bring the CAL device with him. Johanna goes to check the life support system. There she finds an astronaut girl's corpse with all her face burnt. Johanna gets scared to see that. The corpse goes into the space. She fails try and catch the corpse. Because of no camera recording, the agency people don't believe her. They asked Elia to check, but the corpse had gone into space already. Johanna claims that she saw her with her own eyes. That corpse was of Russia, that is, of the Soviet Union. A lady named Erin, who was the chief of Kazakhstan, is forced to think, whereas Johanna is told to ignore this. 2 astronauts named Audrey and Suri treat Paul. He dies despite the crew's efforts. They tie Paul's corpse. The astronauts received an urgent message to repair Soyuz 1 as soon as possible. Fortunately, Soyuz 2 was still operational, so 3 crew members would board it and return to Earth immediately. The remaining astronauts would stay behind to fix Soyuz 1 and then use it to return to Earth once the repairs were complete. The issue now is which 3 people will board Soyuz 2 and come to Earth. Johanna told Audrey, Suri, and Elia to return to Earth on Soyuz 2 as their families were waiting. They boarded the spacecraft and landed safely on Earth. Meanwhile, Johanna stayed behind to repair Soyuz 1, working tirelessly in space to get the job done. Johanna is told that she has to change all the batteries within 19 hours since she has only 19 hours of oxygen left. Meanwhile, Magnus and Alice reach an airport where a private jet is waiting for them. There, Wendy arrives, and it turns out that Wendy's father's name was Paul, who has been killed in the space station. So Alice starts taking care of Wendy. Johanna starts working in the space station. But when she forgets something, she says that has to go back to another place. But the people of the space station forbade her to go anywhere. They say that it will be dark in the next minute, and that's why the oxygen supply will also stop. But Johanna doesn't listen to anyone. But by then this whole space station comes in the dark. The sunlight does not reach there, which leads to blockage of oxygen supply. Johanna quickly comes to Soyuz 2, where there is the corpse of Paul. It was going to be in darkness for 45 minutes. At the same time, the orange suit that she had seen before appears. She sketches her, writes some lines, and sends these to the Kazakhstan Center. She starts watching some videos of her daughter to kill the 45 minutes. Again, the sun comes out. Kazakhstan Space Center contacts Johanna and tells her to find the 6 batteries quickly to put them in Soyuz 1. She sees Henry in California, who calls Erin in Kazakhstan and tells her that astronauts are coming without bringing her device with them. Erin responds she can't put the astronauts' life in danger. Aaron receives the photo sent by Johanna from the space. It was a Russian woman in an orange suit. Aaron, seeing this, becomes very nervous. All 3 astronauts in Soyuz 2 come into the orbit of the Earth and successfully land on the ground. They are taken to the Space Center. Meanwhile, the aeroplane of Alice and Magnus also reaches Kazakhstan. Aaron tells people that the device called CAL core should be brought back. A man named Sergei sends a message to Johanna and asks her to bring that device back. Johanna says that she will bring it if possible. Magnus and Alice head towards the Kazakhstan Space Center. Alice tells her father that she is aware of the absence of a relationship between her parents, though she wants them to stay together. Magnus says that they will never be apart. Johanna is glad to hear about the arrival of her husband and daughter. When Magnus and Alice come inside the Space Center, Johanna's contact with the Space Center breaks and she can't even talk to them. Alice gets very scared and runs away, followed by her father. It gets dark again on the space station while Johanna is replacing the batteries. Then she gets scared to realize that there may be someone else in this space station too. Afterwards, Johanna finds herself in her house. She supposes there is someone in their cupboard knocking on its door, but then she finds herself in the space station, coming to know that she was hallucinating. Now the story comes back to the present where Johanna is in her house in the snowfall. She hears the voice of her daughter and goes out to find her reaching a broken house. Johanna sees a cupboard, and when she opens it, she finds her daughter inside again. She doesn't understand how her daughter is inside the cupboard since she left her daughter at home. Well, still she hugs her daughter. It was cold outside, so she lit a fire to warm some water. They both tell how much they miss each other. Johanna takes Alice to the bathtub to bathe her. Later, Johanna goes to light a candle, but there she sees Alice sleeping on the bed, to which she gets confused. Alice wakes up and asks her mom where she is going. Her mom gets very nervous, and when she goes to see Alice in the bathtub, Alice is not there. That is, all this was Johanna's delusion. The story then shifts to the past when Johanna was in space. She tries to contact the Space Center's people again but fails. She has only 6 hours and 45 minutes of oxygen left. She thinks that she has wasted a lot of time in unconsciousness. Henry on the ground reaches Kazakhstan and meets Arena. He asks if she sent rockets up. She answers that there is no proof of anyone being alive up there, so she didn't send any missiles into space. Johanna in space is still changing the batteries. It gets dark and she comes to Soyuz 1 and starts installing those batteries. She thinks that it takes her 55 minutes per battery to install, and she has to install 4 more batteries. Meanwhile, Magnus is talking to Frederick, who has trained Johanna. Magnus asks him why he is not sending any other rocket. Frederick says that Johanna has only a few hours. He continues saying that by the time our rockets reach there, a lot of time will pass. He also says that even if she fixes Soyuz 1, there is no hope of her surviving, because she will have to calculate the D-orbit herself. Magnus inquires about the D-orbit. Frederick says that when she enters Soyuz 1 in Earth's orbit, she has to come at the right time and separate the other parts of Soyuz 1. This calculation is sent from below, but now all the functions have stopped working. Alice and Wendy were playing on Earth. Alice asks Wendy whether her mom will die. Magnus interrupts, saying no, not at all. He tells her that her mother is very brave, she will survive. While Johanna is replacing the batteries, she is also recording herself, in which she tells Magnus that she loves her very much. She mentions that she has to go home somehow and wants to live her life with him again. But then she hears some voices. She stops her recording and tries to listen to her recording again. In the background of this recording, there was someone else's voice. She thinks that maybe there is someone else here. She gets scared. She also hears the sound of Paul telling her not to breathe. She goes to see him and sees his hand. And as soon as she opens the hatch, she finds out that this is the broken hand of Paul. She sees the shadow of Paul behind her, which makes her scared. At the same time, Henry calls Michaela, who works in the Space Center. Henry tries to find out if they want to send another rocket. Michaela replies that bringing the bodies of 2 people will cost at least $1 billion, and the company is not ready for this. Henry says that he has a device in the satellite that can change the world. But Michaela cuts the phone. Johanna in space is still changing the battery. She now has 2 hours of oxygen left. Then she receives a recorded message from the Space Center asking her to either open all the systems so they can talk to her or to replace the battery quickly. But Johanna can't answer in return due to malfunctioning of the communication system. Meanwhile, Henry goes straight to Arena and asks her why she does not ask for help from other countries. Arena answers that it doesn't work like this. Henry says that he just needs the device. There is a man named Bud in a big ship in California. He is Henry's twin brother. During his interview on TV, a reporter asks him that as he has also gone to the moon. What can happen to the astronaut who was named Johanna? Bud says that he doesn't want to talk about it. Johanna finally changed all the batteries. Now only 90 minutes of oxygen is left. She starts the process of undocking, but for that purpose, it is necessary to put the calculation of the deorbit parameter. When she puts this calculation, the answer comes from the front that this calculation is old. She gets exhausted and she starts beating the machines. Eventually, the process of undocking starts. Magnus's daughter is upset and is making a pearl necklace. She asks her father about the deorbit parameter, and her father says that this is the place where we enter. Alice says that her mother must know this. Magnus answers that she knows everything very well. Johanna quickly starts calculating the deorbit parameter, and finally she does the calculation. But she was getting recorded messages again and again in which they said that they had to bring K and data core with her. So she brings these with her. She puts that calculation in her spaceship and records a message which is in the name of Magnus and his daughter. She confesses her love for them. After that, she quickly leaves this tab in the space station. She wears her spacesuit and closes all the hatches. The undocking process starts, but due to a problem with Soyuz 1, she can't separate Soyuz 1 from the entire space station. Later, she comes to know that it requires 2 people for this purpose, to which her heart breaks. The countdown starts on Earth because in the next 10 seconds, all the oxygen will run out, and the people in the space station will die. Johanna is still in Soyuz 1, but there is also someone else in this space station who manually separates Soyuz 1 from the entire space station. Johanna sees that person in the mirror, but she doesn't understand who this person is. Irina comes to Henry and says that they lost their 2 astronauts. She also says that she will close this entire mission. Henry says that she gave up very quickly. NASA had lost a lot of astronauts during the Apollo mission, but still, they didn't give up. Johanna had done her calculation. She comes into Earth's orbit. She separates different parts of Soyuz 1. People on Earth find out that Soyuz 1 has just entered Earth's orbit. They try to contact Soyuz 1, and finally, they contact Johanna. Johanna says that she is fine. Henry asks her if she has taken the device or not. Johanna says that she has taken that device. Magnus and his daughter also come. Magnus tries to talk to his wife, but her clear voice is not heard. Their connection breaks again. Johanna's Soyuz 1, whose parachute opens, hits the Earth very hard. Johanna becomes unconscious. After a long time, she becomes conscious. She finds out that now she has come to the ground. She is very happy about this. She quickly opens the hatch, but there is a wolf outside. Until then, soldiers and a lot of people come there and kill that wolf and save Johanna's life. They take Johanna out of this Soyuz 1. Johanna becomes excited about meeting Alice and Magnus. Alice is also very happy. Then they take Johanna away from here. Henry quickly takes the CL device and connects it with a tab. Henry was getting a lot of signals through that device. After keeping Johanna in the camp for a while, she is quickly put into a helicopter with Alice and her husband. But after a while, Alice finds herself alone here. And the same thing happens with Johanna. But this was only Johanna and Alice's misconception. This is how the story comes to the present again. Johanna tells her daughter that she saw another Alice here and she took her to the bathtub. Alice says that she didn't see anyone. Johanna was not ready to accept this and told her daughter to dress quickly. She says that they have to go to find the other Alice. Johanna takes the CL device. Then they go to the snowy plains. Alice and Johanna are trying to find the other Alice in the snow. Alice keeps throwing pearls on the snow to keep track of the path. The story goes to the past, where Johanna has returned to the Earth from the space station. After living in the space for too long, her legs have become a little weak. Alice tells her father that her mother doesn't look the way she was before, and it looks like she is dead. Magnus stops her. Later, Johanna gets ready and goes to the meeting. Media people ask her about her collision, to which she responds by saying that she has no idea about that. Further saying that the alarm of ISS rings before the collision, but that time alarm didn't even ring. Alex is also answering the questions raised, while Alice and Magnus are watching Johanna. Later, Johanna visits all 4 astronauts and eats food with them. Wendy tells her that her father was a very brave man and he will always be remembered as a hero. Henry is looking at the CL device while telling his client that his device made some changes just before the collision in space. That is, this device started working. The client inquires about this device's working on the Earth since it was made for space, to which Henry responds of being unaware. Meanwhile, some people meet Bud on the ship and ask for his autograph. The people of the Space Center have a meeting to find out information about the attack on the space station. They start watching the old video when Johanna is talking to her daughter Alice, and Paul is working on that device. Then there happens a powerful attack in the recorded videos, leading to a crush on Paul's hand. But they see no alarm in the space station, concluding that it's all NASA's fault since before crashing the alarm should have been ringing. People of the crew who work with Johanna also tell it about the absence of ringing of the alarm. Then they start watching the external footage, which is outside the International Space Station, ISS. In the footage, when Johanna goes out to do a spacewalk, her camera breaks. The other ISS cameras outside were also not working, concluding it was all NASA's responsibility. Johanna says that she saw the corpse of a Russian woman there in an orange dress, which was completely dry, and she failed to catch it. Irina asked her to stop making wrong accusations, continuing that no Russian woman has been to space in the last 32 years. He asked Johanna why she sent her co-worker Ilya to check the oxygen in her suit. She answered that she felt the lack of oxygen and to verify that she wasn't hallucinating. Irina asks her that did she have hallucinations during the mission, which she denies. Later, Johanna is given tablets during a walk on the ground. It is said that she has to eat all those tablets and she can take only one tablet per day. Henry starts watching the same CAL footage, but his co-worker says that he is getting stuck in this thing for no reason. She asks him that why he is working on this device and spoiling his mind. Johanna asks Magnus if he has noticed any change in her while eating. Magnus affirms that there has been a lot of change in you. He says that she has started loving him more than before. That is, there used to be fights between them, but now those fights don't happen anymore. Johanna starts laughing. Alice calls her father and he leaves. Bud has an interview going on there on the ship. He says that they lost an astronaut, but people don't care about it. He adds that he went to the moon once, but the interviewer expresses his uncertainty on this. Bud says that he was on Apollo 18 and stepped on the moon, but the interviewer denies this, saying that he's just a liar. Bud ends this interview without arguing. Henry is still working on the CAL core. When he looks inside the computer, the device starts emitting signals. He tries to take a picture of these signals but fails. Thus he sketches those signals. Johanna asks Alice to call her father. Alice leaves to call him. Johanna starts looking towards a cupboard, thinking that maybe there is someone inside. Magnus arrives and takes her to the room. Then their meeting starts again, and NASA tells that the orange cloth seen by Johanna can be a garbage bag, since astronauts use an orange bag for garbage. Till then, Alice and Wendy playing hide and seek. Alice hides behind a car, and Wendy finds her. Wendy has a toy like a rabbit. Alice feels like Wendy dropping that toy in the water and crushing it. She goes to stop her and finds out that Wendy is not there. After finding her, she asks her if she crushed her toy. Wendy denies, saying that she is keeping it safe. Alice starts abusing her, to which Wendy gets angry. Wendy replies that her mother says that Alice and her mom are mad, and then leaves. Henry sees all of this. In the meeting, it's said that according to NASA, there are more than 350 orange garbage bags just floating in space. The meeting ends. Johanna doesn't understand why everyone does not believe her. Frederick comes and he says to her that they are trying to prove her wrong. Johanna says that she's sure there was a corpse. Frederick leaves and Johanna goes straight to her room. They are still in the rooms of the Space Center. Johanna is telling her husband Magnus that she wants to leave that place instantly and wants to go home. It turns out that Johanna has completely changed because there used to be a lot of fights between them, but now they have come back together again. Alice is sitting on the swing outside. Henry comes and starts talking with her. Alice asks him what he is doing here. He says that he's working on quantum physics. Alice says that she has heard about quantum physics. Then he tells her that Einstein once said that we can't predict anything. Sometimes it happens that one thing can be in two different states at the same time. A white particle can be seen as black from another angle. Henry tells her that he made a machine to look into the space. He then takes Alice with him and brings her to her parents. Johanna looks at Henry and says that maybe she knows him. He leaves by saying that the device that she brought from the space station was very important to him. Alice tells her mom that Wendy's mom said bad things about them. Johanna says that it doesn't matter. The next morning, those three astronauts meet Johanna. She says that Erin is that Russian girl she saw in an orange suit in space. Those astronauts say that is she accusing Irina. She says that she's not accusing her. Later, they plant flowers on the cover of the Paul. Johanna feels as if Paul is in front of her. NASA is trying to say that what Johanna saw was just a piece of garbage, and she felt that it was a girl's corpse. So Johanna accepts that the oxygen in her suit was low, and that's why she had a stroke. Johanna takes back her claim, and the case is closed. She is sent back to her home in Germany. When drinking water, she leaves the glass. Imagine being in space and the glass will float, but the glass collides with the ground and breaks. Johanna sees a blue car and she asks Magnus that he buy a new car. He says that this is his first car and he had bought a blue car earlier. She gets shocked. Irina comes to Henry and drinks with him, informing him that she has a disease called lymphoma at stage 4. William sees Bud meeting the man interviewing him, but tells him that he didn't kill those 2 astronauts who came with him to the moon. He says that they died suddenly and he couldn't understand the reason behind their death. He also says that he has lost his memory, so the interviewer tells him that it was his brother who went to the moon, not him. Bud gets angry and asks him if he will help him. The man says he can't help a cheater. Bud gets angry and pushes him into the sea to die. The story returns to the present. Alice and Johanna are trying to find the other Alice. Alice tells her mom that people who go to space and come back start feeling bad. Also, they lose their memory. Maybe this has happened to her mom too. Johanna says to her daughter that maybe you are right and not my daughter. Alice says that you are not even my mom. What have you done with my mom? A lot of cars and ambulances are heading this way. Alice and Magnus trudging through the snowy woods in Sweden. They go to a house where Magnus ensures Alice that they won't be seeing Johanna anymore. Johanna receives an unexpected belated Christmas and birthday celebration from her husband and her daughter at present. After supper, Johanna hears from Magnus that they should talk about how things were before she left. He says that she just walked out without looking him in the eye, but she has no memory of it. Johanna wakes up from a terrifying dream the next morning. On reaching the European Space Agency, there is applause as soon as she enters the premises. At night, however, she repeats her concerns towards her husband Magnus. He admits that he suspected her of having an affair with Frederick. In addition, he acknowledges having met someone whom he kissed once. This seriously affects Johanna. Nevertheless, Alice interrupts their conversation by calling Magnus away. Henry is jotting down some points in his office room while Bud wakes up on the ship. There had been a commotion caused by the death of an interviewer on the ship. Elsewhere, Michaela phones Henry informing him that they are closing down the CL project because it seems to have failed. Johanna is in a therapy session and explains that she is having flashbacks. She mentions there is a house with a piano, but she does not play it. The psychotherapist diagnoses her with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and suggests that lithium can help relax her. Johanna thinks this could ruin her career. Outside, Henry talks to Johanna about what she found out during the interview. He brings with him the thing and mentions it was about space travel. The different hallucinations of pilots and astronauts are informed by Bud's conversation. While CL loads, there is an abrupt stab of pain in her left eye, and she glances at the CL reactor. Bud calls his daughter conning on the ship, saying things are bad for him. He wants to contact somebody, but his daughter tells him he should take some pills. At school, Alice's teacher talks thoroughly to Magnus and Johanna concerning Alice's habit of hiding in closets. She says that Alice must feel alienated from her mother, and Johanna is mad at Magnus for concurring with her teacher on this point. At home, Alice hides inside a cupboard with her necklace pinned to the doorknob in Johanna's presence. Johanna has a conversation with Alice, who admits thinking things would be different when her mom came back. Henry talks to Professor Lewis about the CL device. He says the machine picked up a state of being in which one particle was in 2 states at the same time. A pathway to a different universe, but Lewis doesn't believe it. Henry wonders if the experiment is affecting him, affecting his brain chemistry. At home, Johanna tries playing the piano and seems to get the hang of it. She suddenly stops and looks at her fingers. Meanwhile, Agent Bright from the FBI speaks to Bud about the missing interviewer, but makes several excuses to pass himself off as innocent. At home, Johanna compared the contents of the lithium tablets with the vitamin tablets she was given when she returned to Earth. She goes to the ESA, where a machine confirms what she thought. They're both lithium. She searched the database in her office to find that astronauts who had hallucinations were all given this tablet, including Henry Caldera. Just then, 2 men enter the office and start packing up things in boxes, but they can't seem to see her. The light looks different from the 2 men's perspective. Suddenly, they disappear. Johanna goes to Henry's office, where he seems to be talking to his reflection, which turns out to look a lot like Bud. He comments on curiosity to Johanna, and she leaves. Sometime later, Frederick approaches Johanna in her office and talks about how they had planned to be together and even leave to go work privately. This shocks Johanna, who can't recall anything. While giving a talk to Alice's class in school, Johanna suddenly asks Magnus if Sarah is the woman he met with. She does so in front of everyone. Johanna then storms out and drives the family towards home, but nearly causes an accident. She puts a hand over her left eye, which seems to be hurting. Back home, Frederick tells Magnus that Johanna needs rehab for astronaut burnout. He also admits that he and Johanna did have an affair. Johanna enters the room and tells Magnus she has no memory of the affair. She sends Frederick out, but Magnus is convinced that she's lying. Johanna then finds a package from a marine observatory in Denmark which has sent her 2 tapes. They say they heard her on the ISS. Agent Bright looks at the CCTV footage on the ship and watches Bud walking with the interviewer. The video is then covered by 2 pulsing circles similar to the ones on Henry's CAL results. Meanwhile, Johanna listens to the tapes and hears her voice trying to connect with the station. The second tape is from 1967 that records an accident in space where a woman's voice is heard. Alice wakes up and goes downstairs to see a crowd of people in her living room. They are dressed in black and it seems to be Johanna's funeral. She then sees another Alice in the room, also dressed in black. Alice screams and the vision fades. Magnus tucks her inside a cupboard because it makes her feel safe. He says that she is scared of Johanna. Johanna argues with Magnus heading to call Frederick and have Johanna sent to rehab. She tries to take the phone and ends up pushing Magnus, who hits his head on a table as he falls. The story is picked up from the point where Johanna pushes Magnus and his head hits the ground. She panics and calls 911 before leaving the scene with Alice. They are going to take a drive, Johanna tells Alice. At her place of work, they go into her office and listen to a tape recording of her mobile phone conversation with Alice from the ISS. The CAL device was then removed by her, whom she placed in the car. Elsewhere, Henry hears a knock on his hotel room door, but there is no person outside. Bud, who sees him through a mirror, follows him next door rooms. Henry later receives a call from Marina where they discuss on quantum theory part, whereby she says whatever happens to one particle is reflected on its counterpart despite the distance between them. Henry's vision suddenly tips over. On board the ferry, Johanna calls Elia, a fellow astronaut. During this call, she talks about lithium pills. She also asks him if he can perform an analysis of his pills. At ESA, Henry is furious after noticing that the CAL device has been taken. He calls Irina for assistance. Bud calls his daughters and asks about their plans for Thanksgiving dinner. Henry opens the tap in the sink and leaves the hot water running. On the steam on the mirror, he writes, "Leave me alone," but sees the message in the mirror in his bathroom. While eating at a restaurant, Johanna asks Alice why she hides in cupboards. Alice says she's scared of something named Valia. It might be a person or dream that stops Alice from playing and makes her hide instead. Johanna agrees to draw the source of her worry if Alice draws her. She then makes a call to the person who sent her the tapes from Skagerrak, saying she's on the way. But the man says that his sister sent her the tapes and claims that she's crazy. Johanna looks Skagerrak up on the internet and learns that the siblings in charge were prosecuted for blackmailing astronauts with fake tape recordings. Johanna calls Magnus, who is with Frederick. She's about to tell them she was wrong when Alice shows her the drawing. The Valia is none other than an astronaut in an orange suit. Johanna asks Frederick about the medication, but his answers are not satisfactory. She tells Magnus they'll be back soon and puts the phone down. At Star City in Russia, Elia analyzes his medication. He looks for the medical records of the tablets, but they are missing. Irina arrives and tells Elia that Johanna is missing. Johanna drives up to the Skagerrak Observatory with Alice. A woman comes out to meet them and welcomes them inside. The woman says her brother, Lawrence, heard Johanna on his ghost tapes. The siblings' father has left them recording devices through which they heard sounds from space. They started in the mid-90s and even met Henry, who wanted the tapes for his Apollo 18 mission. Meanwhile, Frederick convinces Magnus to not get the police involved. The woman leads Johanna and the others out into a boat. She describes a USR mission when 6 astronauts saw angels. The woman then describes a mysterious sound heard on the tapes. It sounds like static, but she and her brother manage to decode it. Meanwhile, Alice steals the woman's phone and manages to unlock it, but there's no signal. The woman plays a tape and tells Johanna to discern the sound of the woman asking for help. This was the tape from the day Irina went up to space. The woman then says they heard Paul on the day of the incident and were surprised that it was Johanna who came back instead. Alice freaks out when she plays the static sound and they head back to land. The woman gives Johanna the tapes before they get in their car. Alice manages to secretly call her father and tell them they're going to the family cabin. Henry insists on coming with Frederick to get Johanna. While they argue, Henry ends up wetting his pants despite trying to control himself. This must be an effect of his counterpart, Bud. Henry laughs it off. Alice helps her mother talk her thoughts out. She then describes Valia as a dead astronaut floating around the Earth. She murmurs sometimes. They play the old tape again, and this time they can hear the words. The woman, whose voice Alice says is the same as Valia's, says the world is the wrong way round. Henry tries to speak with Bud while looking into a mirror. Bud threatens Henry that he's coming to get him. Johanna and Alice get closer to their cabin when they suddenly face two roads. She decides to drive across a frozen lake and they finally reach the cabin. Johanna is getting Alice out of the car when she thinks she hears Alice's voice from the house. But she dismisses it. Warm and settled in the cabin, Johanna listens to the phone call between her and Alice on the tape. Alice overhears and says that wasn't her voice. She doesn't speak Swedish and she doesn't call Johanna as Mama. Elsewhere, another Alice wrapped up in furs trudges through the snow and screams out for Johanna, calling her Mama. The ISS is working with Paul on CAL and Alice talking to Johanna on the phone. Paul plugs the CAL in and because of that, all hell breaks loose. This time, Johanna crashes into a glass and is badly hurt. Paul tries to help her. Magnus and Alice are given some bad news at school. On the ISS, Paul cannot get hold of CAL. When the three other astronauts leave, Paul says that they should also tell Henry that he lost the CAL device, but they do not remember what he meant by that. Later, lying next to Johanna's dead body, Paul believes that she is breathing. Back on Earth, Magnus discovers Alice is hiding in a cupboard. She enters a car park and stamps her feet on a rabbit. While Wendy tries to help, Alice is still angry. Nobody is present except Paul in that meeting recalls the CAL device. When Johanna was left up there, Houston did not want to share the blame. Once she gets home, Alice vents out her anger on things around her. On the spur of the moment, she hears a piano playing. Magnus' therapist says that Alice needs a farewell for her mother Johanna. In the meantime, Paul watches videos of the Apollo 18 mission. He recognizes a sound similar to that static from ISS which he once heard on it. Afterwards, he searches for Henry Caldera only to learn from somebody that Caldera is just a bus route name. Michaela tells him about Apollo 18's failure and having no idea where Bud is. Afterwards, Paul goes for breakfast with his wife and kids, but ends up talking about Johanna again, making his wife mad and yelling at him. The day of burial comes, however, Alice hides in a closet unwilling to come out. When they reach there, Paul becomes agitated and talks about leaving his friend in space. During the burial ceremony at last, Wen berates Wendy for not speaking to Alice. An angry Wendy pulls Alice over and says her father thinks she might still be alive. That's when Alice sees the other Alice in her pajamas. She also sees Johanna and screams for her mother. Magnus pulls Alice away and suggests they go somewhere alone, just them. Alice insists she wants to go to her mother's cabin. Magnus and Alice get snowed in on the way to the cabin and Alice insists on walking there. Erica wakes up to find that Paul is gone. She enlists Michaela's help, who says that Paul must be taken to a rehabilitation clinic. Meanwhile, in California, Paul arrives near Bud Caldera's house. Magnus and Alice settle inside the cabin. Magnus breaks down about his wife's death and tells Alice that they have to start over on their own. Paul confronts Bud. In his house, he sees clips of the Apollo 18 accident. In Paul's version, everyone came home safe and sound. In Bud's version, 2 men died. They argue and Bud eventually pulls out a gun out of anger. In the cabin, Alice wakes up to see a car roll up. Johanna gets out of it. Alice sees Johanna getting out of a car just outside of the cabin in the opening scene. But when Alice goes outside, there is nothing to be seen. She shouts at her mother, and in the alternate world, Johanna hears something. Alice then puts on her coat and dashes out into the snow. In an alternate universe, Johanna and Alice listen to their phone conversation right before the accident. However, they speak Swedish, and Alice says she doesn't know it. Johanna gets worried. She doesn't even recall having a CAL device before the accident. They both hear another tape from one day after the accident. The tape has Paul's voice asking the station about Johanna's dead body. On the other hand, Alice says that this person doesn't feel like her mom, but they promise to figure things out together. Meanwhile, Henry, Frederick, and Magnus are heading for Johanna's cabin again. Henry claims he has gone through what she did. Johanna is putting away a cowl in the shed when she starts hearing screams from another Alice again far away at the bed where one Alice still lies asleep. Johanna goes off looking for the other one. Lately though, when Alice returns, she looks broken down and empty. Inside, Alice locates a closet and climbs into it, hanging her necklace on the door. Just then the door slams shut and locks her in. But Johanna finds her there eventually as she is already suffering from a cold. Johanna carries Alice back to her original cabin, where she warms her up by putting her in a bathtub. The moment Johanna goes out for more hot water, she gets a headache. Suddenly, Johanna disappears, just like the water did in the bathtub. Alice has been left alone again. Her father comes over and warms her up, but he does not believe she saw her mother. In another world, Johanna tells Alice to put on clothes before they go outside to find another Alice. As they walk along, Alice thinks that maybe Johanna is hallucinating things. By admitting that Alice was right, Johanna also says she isn't her mother. This makes Alice sad enough for her to run away. The other Alice wraps herself in warm clothes, leaving again, as well as Magnus awakes when this happens. On this trip with Johanna, however, this particular Alice finds those beads of necklaces left behind by the real one in the snow while walking with Johanna. And also, here fallen into the snow is a cowl found by this girl finally. Alice, the one who ran away from Johanna, ends up finding the empty, broken down cabin. But this time, the white cassette player they were using was lying on the table. Alice goes upstairs and sees the necklace on the cupboard door. She gets inside, but at the front door, the other Alice arrives. In the cupboard, the first Alice records a message on the cassette player. The other Alice finds the message and records one back. Both Alice start talking to each other, but not being able to see each other. They talk about being at the cabin, and suddenly, Johanna and Paul hear the girls' voices in their respective universes. They reach upstairs to see the voices coming from the cassette player. Johanna takes the player and gets in her car. Magnus goes out and sees Alice's footsteps going out on the frozen lake. In the cabin, Johanna left. A lamp falls over and starts a fire. The two Alices look in the mirror and talk to each other. One tells the other that her mother is dead. As they talk about her death, Johanna realizes the cabin is on fire and rushes back. Both Alices realize that their mothers have been swapped. Elsewhere, while a road is being cleared of snow, Henry tells Magnus about his own experience and how his crew members were dead until suddenly they were alive again. As Magnus and the policeman spread out through the woods, Henry goes on his own and starts getting a deep headache. Johanna runs into the burning cabin only to enter the empty, broken one instead. She can still see the flames in the reflection of a painting. She goes upstairs and finds Alice in the cupboard. The other Alice speaks through the cassette player. Johanna speaks to her daughter, Alice through the cassette player, and even sees her in the mirror. Johanna tells her that she'll try to make it back. Henry follows a light in the snow and finds the cowl. But then all of a sudden, he sees the burning cabin and drops the cowl in the snow as he rushes towards it. The cabin suddenly shifts to the one on fire, and Johanna pulls Alice out, although she's already inhaled quite a bit of the fumes. While Henry approaches the cabin, Bud has his confrontation with Paul in the other universe. Johanna gives Alice to Henry and goes back in to look for her real daughter. Henry is in the apartment with a bleeding Paul, and Bud is now in the snow with Alice. He leaves her in the snow and walks away. Johanna comes out to find Alice in an unconscious state. While she's doing CPR, Johanna's real daughter arrives there and says she can't feel the other Alice anymore. Still, Johanna tells her to go to her father Magnus. For a second, Magnus even sees silhouettes of the three of them in the snow from afar. Then it fades and Magnus reunites with Alice. Johanna manages to revive the other Alice, but by then her own Alice is gone. Sometime later, the injured Alice is sleeping in the hospital. Alice has a dream where she sees Valia, the corpse in an astronaut suit. Valia tells Alice she can take her to see her mother. When she wakes up, Magnus tells Alice that Irina is helping Johanna to get better. Alice says they need to get Johanna back. Multiple events are transpiring simultaneously. Johanna is taken to the Berlitz Heilstätten Sanatorium while Irina watches her from above holding a beaded necklace. When Johanna looks up from the stretcher, she sees the dead cosmonaut walking alongside her. Johanna gets hooked up to an electroshock machine and gets electrocuted for just over a minute until her flatlines. Just as Johanna is shocked, the IS transitions from dark to light. Next, simultaneously, Bud wakes up in Henry's reality to find the CAL in the snow and the ghost tapes and the player of Johanna's blue car. And Bud destroys the CAL device while it's activated. Then the tapes pull apart, the IS powers back down, and Johanna looks to be dead. Right after Johanna collapses from the electroshock, Blue Alice is just returning home with Magnus and tries to convince him that Mommy died and that Johanna is another of Alice's moms. Magnus has no patience for this, and he tells her that she just spent 2 days with Johanna. Blue Alice woke up at a hospital after the cabin incident, and Blue Magnus still has the cut on his head from when he hit the piano. In this scene, Blue Alice and Magnus go straight home after the cabin, and Magnus does not have a cut on his head. There are two different versions of Blue Alice and Magnus. As Alice and Magnus continue to disagree about Johanna being dead, Irina is having blue reality mementos rolled into the sanatorium. Irina has an ultrasound performed on Johanna, and to her concern it looks like she's pregnant, and the baby is putting off an interference pattern just like the CAL device. Henry, in Bud's reality, is being charged for shooting Paul Lancaster and for the murder of Ian Rogers. He demands a polygraph and a DNA test. Bud, on the other hand, is having a much better time. He's living it up in his fancy room while discussing the busted CAL in Johanna with Frederick. Bud blames destroying the CAL on Johanna when he says she's taken an axe and given it 40 whacks. At the sanatorium, Johanna wakes up in the dark to find herself locked in her room with a piano and some blue reality family photos. Just as Johanna has a headache, she hears someone from upstairs crying out right before a nurse opens the door. After being locked in, Johanna and Irina continue to argue about what she's been seeing. Johanna is given an eye test while they talk. Her right eye reacts to the light, but her left does not. Irina tells Johanna that Alice was very sick after the fire, but is recovering. She also tells her that Johanna is pregnant and they have a new treatment that keeps both her and the baby safe. Johanna still demands that she must go back to where Alice is. Johanna asks what the crying out noise from upstairs is, and Irina mysteriously says that there's another incurable guest there. Johanna grabs her arm and sees the dead cosmonaut instead. She realizes they're the same. This freaks out Irina by reciting the ghost tape, leaving the room completely distressed. While Bud in Henry's reality is going through some of Henry's folders, in which Irina is talking to Henry about his missions as well as Johanna's and Paul's missions. In November 2023, the real-life cold atom lab on the ISS officially generated a quantum gas containing 2 species of atoms. This was achieved by using a cloud of potassium rubidium. At the center of the CAL is a chamber of rubidium atoms. Henry, on the other hand, is hooked up to a polygraph and tells the complete truth from his perspective about who he is and how he knows Paul from NASA. He says he didn't kill Paul Lancaster but may be responsible for his death due to a machine that he invented. Ilya comes to visit Johanna. Seemingly he has switched sides. He starts friendly but gets a bit shifty when trying to get Johanna to play the piano. He says this is called astronaut burnout. Johanna continues to plead, but her way of describing all this sounds pretty crazy. Just as he leaves, he slips her a set of keys and says that if she doesn't get better, it'll only get worse. Back to Bud living Henry's life, Bud shows up at a fancy restaurant to meet with Irina. Bud ends up telling her all about switching places and that now he's the guy who won the Nobel Prize and wants to make sure the pills smooth out his little personality disorder. Back at the sanatorium, Johanna uses the keys Ilya passed her to check out what's going on upstairs. She sneaks past a sleeping nurse and finds a room with some creepy-looking twins who keep repeating mama. Johanna runs back to her room and starts to give those pills a second thought before crying herself to sleep. While Johanna starts to grasp how bad things are looking for her, Alice starts to come to terms with qualities in her dad after having a conversation with Wendy about her dad being dead. She apologizes to her dad by saying that she knows what her mom said is make-believe, and they agree to see her. Both Alice end up pulling out tape recorders, but when Red Alice asks to play a game and talk to her mama, Blue Alice leads her on the plane. As Blue Alice looks dismayed by her decision to ignore Red Alice, Johanna starts playing the piano and singing a song in Swedish. When Johanna finishes, Alice and Magnus finish packing and head out. Red Alice accepts that her mom is gone and asks her dad if she is brave. Magnus hugs her proudly, saying that she's brave. After Magnus and Alice drive off in a red Volvo, Bud and Henry swap. They only swap minds, not bodies. Bud says that he's being formally charged with the murder of Ian Rogers and the attempted murder of Paul Lancaster. Paul is alive in this reality. Bud, now in Henry's reality, finds Ian Rogers in an alley giving guided tours for Jack the Ripper's White Hippo murders. He highlights the double event murders that took place 3 weeks after the murder of Annie Chapman. Also, the song Johanna sang earlier was about tying up her 11 trolls, and there being a total of 11 White Hippo murders sounds like a connection. Mr. Rogers is spooked by Bud coming and showing up out of nowhere, but hands him a bouquet and tells him to live his best life. At the sanatorium, Irina comes to visit Johanna and tells her there's only one man upstairs, the first man in space. Irina tells Johanna to play the piano and to do things that her body is familiar with. Johanna realizes at this point the sad truth is that she is dead in the other reality and there's no point in going back to a dead Johanna. Irina pleads with Johanna. Irina offers her to adopt a child, which she accepts. Magnus and Alice pull up in a blue car having different license plate numbers and rims. Johanna looks out the window to sense a vibe of relief on her face and has a heart-to-heart talk with Alice about accepting her new reality. That Johanna is proud of Alice. Back inside the sanatorium, Johanna tries to be rational with Magnus by showing him the picture that Alice drew of Valida. As Johanna gets ready to head out, Irina takes another look at the entangled baby inside Johanna and decides to send an email to the astronaut Manlinus, stating that in 1967, she became the second woman in space, and since then, it's been her burden to hide and conceal the basic fact that space travel drives people mad. Just as Irina sends her email, Paul wakes up in the hospital, panicking and grabs the nurse. He says he has seen something, then looks up at his arms and is surprised to see both. Johanna, Alice, and Magnus are getting ready to leave the sanatorium. Johanna apologizes to Magnus, saying things are different, but she loves him. Irina sends Alice off with some sweets and tells Alice that her friends call her Valia. In the final moments, we go back to the ISS and hear the same message from Johanna, saying that her eyes will always be on her and her heart will always beat for her. They finally show the damage to Johanna's face, and just as the iPad gets near her, she reaches out and grabs it.